Hi everyone, so today I'm going to show you how to make two cards using the Bedside manner and the Call the Shots stamp sets from MFT Stamps' new August 2019 release. These are mini stamp sets that feature a doctor and a little nurse, and they have some great sayings for either a doctor or a nurse appreciation day, or they also work for a Get Well Soon card. And you can mix and match both of the stamp sets, which I really like and which I did in the card on the left. So without further ado, let's get started with card number one. So for card number one, we're just going to stamp our little nurse on a piece of Copic friendly cardstock, and I'm using the Express It blending card here, which is my favorite Copic paper at the moment. I stamped her cheeks in first with R30. And the reason I stamp the cheeks first before the skin tone is I just find that the color blends better when you apply the cheek color first as opposed to putting it over the skin tone. That's just what works for me. For her skin tone, we're going to use E00 for the base, E13 for the darkest shadow area, and then E11 as our mid-tone. And I'm focusing the shadowing on the left side of her, and also I added some shading in little places where you'd see a crease, like by her wrist, so I made that little indentation a little bit darker. Now I'm just coloring in her ear with the same colors as I used for her face and her hand. And then we're going to color in her hair, and we're going to make our little nurse a brunette, and I'm using a different color combination I think than I've ever used. I'm going to use the E70s to make this nurse's hair. The thing I like about the E70s, they're kind of a dull brown. There's a little bit of a purplish hue to them. So I just thought it would be fun to try to make a brunette out of this range of colors. And it worked pretty well. And then I did go in and darken it up with some E40s at the end. Now for her little scrubs, we're going to color them in violet color. So this is my favorite violet combination of the moment, BV00, BV02, and then BV04. And I'm just going to put the shading on her pants, like under her shirt, and then like at the knee on both legs. And then I put some shading like right by her foot where her pants might bunch up a little bit. And then I'm just going to blend it all together with my BV02 and then my BV00. And it'll blend back pretty nicely once all is said and done. For her shirt, I'm going to use those same colors, and I'm going to make her shirt just slightly lighter than the pants, just to give the image some interest, just so it didn't look like, even though she is wearing all the same color clothes, and that's how scrubs look in real life, I wanted them to be a little interesting looking, so I left a lot of light space on the front of her chest towards the right side. For the shoes, I'm just using some C7 and C5, and then to color in her little clipboard, we're going to use a C3 and C5 again, and a little bit of C7. For the paper, that's BG70 and then BG72, and I'm just going along the edges there. And then we're going to add some little scribbles to make it look like there's some writing in her chart. And I just used a Copic multi-liner for that. I purchased the dies for this set, so we're just going to take the die, snap it onto our image, and then run it through the die cutting machine. And here she is. So she's all cut out. She looks adorable. And now I'm just going to add some little eyelashes. So I'm just going to put a little curved line on each side of her eyes with a 01 multi-liner. And then to darken up her eyes, I just put a little dot with my 100 Copic marker, which is the pure black. And there she is. She looks pretty cute to me. So for the background, I'm just taking a piece of Nina Solar White cardstock, 120 pound weight or 110 pound weight. I can never remember which it is. And then I'm going to add some tumbled glass Distress Oxide ink to the background. And I'm just trying to make a really light cloud here. Not an actual cloud, but just a cloud of color, just to give the little entwined hearts that we're going to place onto our panel a place to rest and to add just the slightest bit of color to the background. So I'm using this Golden Glacier cardstock by Tonic to cut out my hearts, and this is the Entwined Hearts die that was previously released by MFT Stamps, and I just love it so much. It's adorable, and I think it looks great paired with that Golden Glacier cardstock by Tonic. Then I'm just going to dot some glue along the back here. I guess I could have used stick-it adhesive, but I really don't mind just dotting my glue on like this. It works fine for me. And that's multimedia matte adhesive. And then we're just going to place that right onto the back. And my thought here for this card was that nurses have hearts of gold. So I kind of wanted the just the elements in the card to reflect that. So that's why I pulled out my entwined hearts from a few months back and my gold paper, and I thought it would be nice just to have this backdrop behind our little nurse, just to reinforce the fact that she definitely has a heart of gold. And I'm just going to fill in or inlay set some of the die cuts for two of the hearts, just to make it a little bit interesting looking. You could do all of them if you like. You could have inlaid different die cut pieces as well, or different pattern papers to make it interesting, but I thought that just adding these two hearts back was enough. And then I'm going to attach everything to a piece of fog cardstock. And for our sentiment, I stamped it on some Lawn Fawn cardstock. I don't remember the name of this, but it kind of reminded me of Hospital Scrubs or the TV show MASH, so I don't know. I just thought it would work nice on this card. And then I'm just popping it up on some foam tape and then putting our nurse on top. I had a little blotch above the hero, so I put a little pill bottle over it. And then I'm going to add this little thermometer and then a little shot as well, popped up on foam tape, just to give the image or the card a little bit more interest. And those are all stamps that are included in the Call the Shot stamp set. Okay, so I forgot to glue her feet down, so that's all I'm doing there, just gluing them to the sentiment so they don't stick out. Adding some glossy accents to some areas on those little items, and then also on the little stethoscope that she's wearing. And that is gonna do it for this card. So this is our first card. It says nurse is another word for hero, and it has our little gold hearts in the background to reinforce the idea that nurses truly have a heart of gold. Okay, so now moving on to the second card. We are going to use both the Bedside Manor and the Call the Shot stamp set to make this card. And we're going to start by stamping all of our images on the card. And I'm going to start with a little nurse in the left-hand corner. And then we're going to put some little pill bottles and thermometers and shots on the floor around her feet. And the scene that we're creating a scene in a hospital where our little nurse is going to be standing in front of a counter, and there's going to be a doctor behind the counter, and then there's going to be two little coffee cups in between them, and the sentiment is going to say, time with a great friend is the best prescription. And then on the inside of the card, we're going to stamp, let's have a coffee break. And for the inside sentiment, I just used a sentiment from the coffee break stamp set for that. So I thought that this is a cute card for friends who work in a hospital, for one friend to invite the other friend maybe to take a little coffee break with them. That was the idea for this card. So I'm just drawing on the ledge right now that our little coffee mugs are going to sit on. And we have our little doctor on the right hand side, and I only needed to stamp half of him onto the scene because only half of him is going to show because he's standing behind the counter. And then we're going to put a little brick wall behind them, and there are several ways you can make a brick wall. You could make it the way that I'm making here, which is just to draw it in with Copics, or you could get a stencil and you could use some distress ink or pigment ink or whatever kind of ink you have to fill in the wall that way, or you could leave it blank. Just some ideas for how to do this, but since I had my Copics handy, I thought I would just draw them in with the Copics. And what I've done here is I just make little rows of rectangles, and I color them in with C0. And then I'm going to shade them in with some C0 once they're all drawn in. And then I'm going to add little bits of shading with a C1 marker in an L shape along the bottom and the right side of the bricks. And then I'm going to put another little shadow in the upper left-hand corner that's kind of like a, like it looks like a little wishbone, I guess. And then I just blend everything together with a C0. And then that gives me a really nice look of bricks in the background, but they're also done with light enough colors that they don't really overwhelm the scene and they just kind of fade into the background nicely. If you wanted the bricks to stand out more, if they were more of a focal point in your piece, then you would just use darker colors to get an effect where the bricks stood out a little bit more. It would be the same exact technique, the same exact way of shading, the same exact placement of the light, the midtone, and the dark. You would just be using some darker markers. And again, you would try to do them within 1 to 2 shades of each other, from light to dark. So I'm just blending out our bricks with some BG70 just to make it look like maybe the wall behind the bricks is painted a really, really light blue-green color. That's what I was going for there. And then for the counter itself, we're going to color it in with C1 and then add some shadows with a C5. And then just blend things together a little bit more with our C1. And then we're going to go back and add some even darker shadows underneath the ledge in a moment. So now I'm coloring the ledge and the ground with some BG70, and then I'm going to add in a darker color with a BG72. Then I decided I wasn't that crazy with how that looked. I think that the BG70 and 72 are great colors if you want it to kind of look like a hospital or an OR, but for whatever reason it just wasn't speaking to me today, so I'm just going to color over some of them with my cool gray markers. So here I'm just darkening up the counter with some C5, C3, and then C1, adding an even darker shadow underneath the ledge with a C70, just to make it for there to be a distinction between the ledge and the rest of the body of the counter. And now we're done. So I'm going to peel off the masks. And then we can start coloring in our little doctor and nurse and all of the little pill bottles and shots and stuff that are across the ground. So for the skin tone, I'm going to use the same skin tone that we use for the nurse in the first card that we made. We're going to color in the cheeks with some R20, and then we're going to fill in the base of the skin with E00, and then add our shadows with E13, and then our midtone is going to be E11, just like with our first nurse that we made. And I'm putting the darkest shadows on the edges of the faces of the characters that are closest to the edge of the card. So for the little girl, her darkest shading is to the left, and for the little boy, his darkest shading is to the right. And now we're going to color in the coffee cup. So I wanted it to look like they have a little brown paper holder around them. So I'm going to color those in with E31, E35, and E37. And then the cups themselves are E30 and E20, so a nice pretty peachy pink color. And then the lids are just going to be pure white, so we're just going to add a little bit of shading with our C5 marker, just to add some depth to the white images. And now we can start with the nurse's hair. And so for her hair, we're going to make her a brunette, and instead of using the E70s markers, we're going to use the E20s for our little nurse. And this is probably my favorite color combination for brunettes. The E20 series is really, really bright and vibrant, and it can be a color that is overpowering in scenes sometimes, so it's probably not the best color to make trees. If the trees are the background of your picture and not the focal image. But for hair, I find that it works really nice, especially since we want our little nurse to pop out from the scene. So it makes sense to give her a bright colored or strong colored hair. Strong color, using markers with strong colors so that she stands out. Okay, for our little boy, I thought let's make a little redhead. So I'm using E19 and some E37 for his hair and some other E's as well. And then I gave him some little freckles with a Copic multi-liner in sepia. And I just kind of dotted them on his cheeks. So now we have a little red-haired doctor with some freckles. I love this little doctor. I think he's so cute. And I love how his hair and his freckles came out. For his suit, we're gonna give him a blue tie, and his jacket's gonna be white, so we're just gonna add some shading in grays. And now for the scrubs on this little nurse, we did purple for our first nurse. So for this one, I thought let's use some yellow green. So we're gonna use YG 91 to 99. And we're gonna focus our shading the same way that we did with the first nurse, just adding the shading on the tops of her thighs, the part that peeks out from under her shirt. We're gonna draw some shading around where her knees would be. And then also towards the bottom of her shoes. And then we'll just blend all of that together with our lighter YG colors. We're gonna focus the shading mostly on the left side of her, and then we're going to keep the front of her shirt and the right side of her shirt pretty light. And just coloring in some little spots that I missed on the counter. And then for her clipboard, we're going to make it BG72. And then the little clip itself, we'll use some cool gray markers for that one. And then I'm just drawing on the little scribbles onto her little clipboard, just like we did before. And now I'm coloring the pill bottles in with YR21 for the base, 27 for the shading, and then 24 for the midtone. And these are the same colors that I used for the pill bottles on the first card. So if you wanted to duplicate those, you would just use the colors that you see me coloring in the items here for that. For the little hearts on the pill bottles, I'm gonna put a little dot of YR12 in the center and then shade them in with R39 and R29. That's one of my favorite combinations for reds. The YR12 just gives it a really, really pretty pop of lightness in the center of the heart. So I just love that effect, so I do it often. For the smaller pill bottles, we're going to color them in a little bit differently with little pink labels, and then the bottles themselves will be purple. And then for our syringes, that is going to be BG10 and then BG11 for the little area where the medicine would be. And then for the metal parts of the syringe, I just use some cool grays there. For our thermometer, I'm going to use some blues and some blue-green for the center. I actually don't have any thermometers home, and I didn't look one up, so I'm not sure what colors they would be, but for our scene, I thought I would just pull in some colors that we were using elsewhere in the card just to kind of tie everything together. So that's why I'm coloring the thermometers that way. For the caps on the pill bottles, we're going to use our cool grays again. So the only grays that I'm using in these cards are the cool grays this time. And I'm just leaving the center of the pill boxes pretty light. And then I gave our little nurse eyelashes, darkening up the eyes with a 100 marker. I've been doing that a lot lately instead of using the glaze pen. I've been having some not so great results with the glaze pens on critter eyes that are more of an oval shape than a round shape. So that's why I've kind of moved to just using a 100 marker instead of glaze pen lately. All right, so now disaster is going to strike in a second, but don't worry, we're going to fix it. So I stamped our sentiment onto our counter using my MFT, right, to make sure that we place everything correctly. And now watch what happens. Don't be too heartbroken. We have a happy ending at the end of the story. I didn't position things correctly. So I just went and I stamped the sentiment onto a piece of black cardstock and it works just fine. So now for the inside of our card, which is a fog colored cardstock, we're gonna just stamp "Let's have a coffee break," because like I said, the theme of this card is two people who work in a hospital and one of them invites the other to have a coffee break. So I'm gonna pop up our sentiment on some foam tape, give you one last look at the mistake, and then boom, the mistake is gone. And now we have a perfect, pretty little card. And the last thing we're gonna do is just stamp some steam coming out of our 2 coffee cups. And then we're just gonna attach the whole A2 size card panel to an A2 size card base. And this is fog cardstock that I'm using here. And then our card is done. And so we have this adorable little doctor and nurse with a sentiment that says, "Time with a great friend is the best prescription." And they're inside the hospital. And then you open up the card, it says, "Let's have a coffee break." So I think that this is a great card if you work in a hospital and you have a friend at the hospital and you want to just send them a little note letting them know you're thinking of them and also inviting them for a coffee break. This would be a great card for that. That's all I have for you now, everyone. Have a great weekend, and I will see you again soon in the next video.